Now, I'm no game dev, that much is clear, but this OTA has a bunch of changes that, quite frankly, are completely baffling to me. It feels like this OTA was a lot of change for change's sake, and it also did a really weird job of making changes that no one asked for, and also destroying cards that seemed like they just started getting played. To the point it's like, why are we releasing cards if they're either garbage and unplayable, or the moment they become playable, people spend their tokens on them, and then we take them out behind the shed and pump them. So I'm not quite sure what the goal behind an OTA like this is, and I kind of wish it didn't happen. I'm not trying to be negative, but I actually came away from this OTA as a whole just thinking what the hell are we doing? And so again, we might not have all the information. There's obviously cards that are being data mined and coming out in the future that I think are going to warrant some of the changes we see. But at the same time, I'm I don't know. This OTA, it's mid as hell, and I don't know what the goal was. But let's talk through it. I'd be interested in your thoughts in the comments, but I'm coming away already. I haven't even talked about the cards yet. It starts with Scream. Now, Scream has always been one of my absolute favorite cards in the game since its release. When it came out, Coccia and I talked about how it was our favorite card of the season, and it's running a 4% meta share. And yes, it's running a 54% win rate. It has consistently been a very good deck. However, here's something worth noting. Who the hell's complaining about Scream? Nobody. And I understand the idea of okay, yes, it has a Mr. Negative effect. When you draw Scream, it feels like your deck becomes nearly unstoppable. When you draw Mr. Negative and you snap, you have the same type of effect. I absolutely understand that. But to take a power off of Scream and also fix the bug, right, that was actually part of its power kit is actually kind of sad. And also, again, whether or not internally it's doing as well as, we think it is, it seems kind of crazy to me to go after a card that created a whole new archetype, bring it down, and it's really non-problematic for the meta. When you see a 4% meta share, that to me does not scream problematic. I'm not hearing high infinite players in the top 100 talking about how Scream is ruining their nights on a frequent basis. This seemed like a change that didn't need to happen. Now, they did mention try to fix the uniformity of the power across that deck, right? Okay, I'm in for that, right? If Scream is the one-trick pony that's carrying the entire deck, well, then make a change that makes sense, right? And sure, changing Spider-Man's a buff, right? You're taking Spider-Man from a 3-5 to a 2-4. That is most certainly a buff. However, Spider-Man does not feel like that doesn't answer the question. In fact, I don't think that the Spider-Man buff compensates for the nerf being made to Scream. Now, I don't want to discount this buff. It is a very significant buff. A decrease in cost with only one decrease in power is very significant. However, you took a massive chunk out of what the main point of that deck was. Why not actually buff Kingpin or, give some another card a little bit of extra love? Instead of taking power off of the Scream, give a little bit to the Kingpin as well, right? I don't think the Spider-Man buff actually fixes it, right? On aggregate, perhaps the win rates remain the same, but what you just did was you took a deck that was fun to play and you took the fun part out of it, right? You took the Scream part, which is what you wanted, and Scream for this archetype is the She-Hulk or the Cyclops of high Evo, right? It's the Ajax of Toxic. It's the thing. It's the win condition, right? And it sucks to have it kind of neutered, and then you only get, we buffed Spider-Man a bit. Well, yeah, okay, cool. But now the deck is probably going to feel terrible. Now, of course, I haven't played it yet because the patch just dropped. But for me, it's kind of sad because I love Scream decks. And I don't think this change mitigates the change they made to Scream. So that's just my take on it. Again, let me know in the comments, sound off. If I'm right, if I'm wrong, let me know. But yeah, my initial impression is kind of why? Why? If you're going to take power off Scream, give it to something that's also an activator. You know what I mean? And to some degree, Spider-Man is, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not sold on it. What can I say? Neither am I sold on this. This actually kind of bothers me. Now, I know that Luke Cage is very good. As a 3-3, he was solid. And what I think made him solid was that he was being used as a tech piece against, negative power. But he was also being used in the negative power decks because a lot of these negative power cards have reciprocating effects. Hazmat, US Agent, Man-Thing, they impact their own side of the board. And so Luke Cage became kind of a core component of that. And so if you're thinking about a design philosophy, you're thinking, okay, if Luke Cage prevents your cards from being, put down in power, and that's it kind of destroys that reciprocation of the negative effect, well, yeah, that's naturally why you want to run it. However, if you don't want it offensively, maybe you need to reconsider what Toxic does as a whole Maybe Man-Thing shouldn't be hitting your side and needs a reduction in power. I don't know. Again, I'm not a game dev. But I'm going to tell you, I don't feel like Luke Cage is the problem. You have so many answers for Luke Cage. Rogue, Enchantress, you have, Red Guardian. There's tons of answers for Luke Cage. And if you really want to counter Luke Cage, you can. And so, like, to see this power reduction, like, I get it. He is a good card, but, like, why can't Luke Cage be a good card? You know what I mean? Why can't we have Luke Cage being a good card? And I understand that, like, yeah, he might be slightly overperforming, but he runs a 51% win rate and a 12% meta share. 12% is legit for a tech card, but it's not what Shang-Chi's doing. It's not what Shadow King does. And the crazy thing about it is a lot of the share for Luke Cage is the offensive side. Now, Luke Cage is just worse defensively. To add him into your deck to, prevent any sort of shenanigans from debuffing power now just feels worse. In fact, now you have to run a Rogue or something because you're almost certainly better taking their Luke Cage if they're playing it offensively. It just seems really strange to me. Again, a little bit of head scratcher, a little baffling. And I understand that this card is good and it's in very high performing shells. But like, yeah, I don't know. Like, another one I don't quite agree with. I feel like Luke Cage was not on my bingo card to get nerfed. He's been changed so many times too, right? Like, just so many times. I'm glad they didn't make him like location specific. That would have been far worse. I actually hate this. And I hate one other one more. But like, this card, when it did -3 power, was like unplayable. It was so much worse. And you might not think, well, Alex, like, it's not that much different. -3 power versus -4. It is way different. It's way different. And it just so happens that US Agent has finally become playable in a number of decks. Finally. He was seeing almost no play. And even then, like, you don't just play a turn 2 US Agent, right? You don't just like throw him out there and hope for the best. You can't even Moonstone with him very effectively. So like, what are we doing? This seems like, again, a change that no one asked for. Why are we nerfing US Agent? You release the card, he's literally garbage and unplayable. You buff him, he becomes playable, he makes a couple decks, people buy him with tokens, and then you nerf him? It's just like, man, I don't know. He's been good. He's been performing in very high-end shells. Like, Ajax has been great, but like, I would actually rather see them take power off Ajax than US Agent. Right? Like, I'll be honest with you. Like, US Agent's a cool card. I think that it's a really interesting tech piece that does damage. And don't forget, it's a good card against, like, Hela stuff and like anything that throws down big bodies. Surtur, for instance. US Agent was effective into those decks. It's also very effective into 2099, Doom 2099, because of the fact that those Doom bots and everything are forecasted. So like, now those Doom bots, they're just better. Doom 29 is just better. It's kind of crazy, right? And like, these types of changes have these knock-on effects. Oh man, I'm not sold on it. I don't love it. And again, 12% meta share, it's another change that I just don't think anyone asked for. Now this one's a good one. I'll take this. I would even make the argument he probably could have even gone higher. And it's funny because I talked about changes no one asked for. No one asked for this either, but I think it makes a lot of sense. Because with Kazar, he does feel like a terrible blue marble. And yes, he's one cost cheaper, and you have a lot of one-costed cards that do benefit from the power, of course. But like, his power always felt a little far behind, and now that 4/6 feels like the baseline for 4 costs. And obviously he reaches beyond that. But like, generally speaking, as a 4/5, you need 5 1-drops in order to get to the 4/10 stat line. And we have cards like Ares coming out that could potentially reach higher. And 4/10 seems to be like you solve a condition and you get the prize. You get the lollipop, right? So still, he probably is still a little underpowered, honestly. But Zoo needed a little bit of love. I'm glad they didn't touch the Gilgamesh side. Give Kazar a little bit of love. This makes sense. I'll agree with this one. No. Nope. Glasses are coming off because I'm actually pissed. This really bothers me. So you have Hydration Robert in the Spotlight Cache. You buff him with like 2 hours remaining, right? Like, you buff him. He's 1/4. And even then, you can go back to my review. I was like, he's pretty good, honestly. He's not great, but he's pretty good. When they buff him to a 1/5, just as the Spotlight Caches are expiring, talk about FOMOing, by the way, it takes a while. Finally, Hydration Robert, as a 1/5, starts to make decks. It took a while to get there. He starts to make decks. Positive cube rate, 9% meta share, really good win rate. You know what happened over the last couple of weeks? Hydration Robert did, in fact, start making decks. He started being a core component of some lists. He's a 1-drop. He moves after you snap. He's not going to break the game. But every single person that just bought this card, which is a lot, this feels like an absolute slap in the face so hard. This card has been playable for like 2 weeks. And it's always been playable, to be honest. It's always been playable. But it's really found its spot in the meta over the last 2 weeks. And then this is what you do? It's crazy to me that they would make this decision because it is just an absolute kick in the schnutz to every player that drops 6k tokens on this card. It's an expensive card. It's a 1-drop. And so it's hard to like throw your tokens at a card that's a 1-drop like this, right? So it's so depressing for me because you could have just left it at 1.5. Like, yes, it's been good, but has it really been the problem? I don't think it has. I think the snapping stuff has nuance. You have Killmonger. You have ways to deal with it. And so this feels really rough to me. And yes, does it outpunch a Silver Sable now? Yeah, it does. It does outpunch Silver Sable. That's why it was being played. Here's an okay one. Sentry completely fell off the face of the earth. They hit it pretty hard. I do agree with the fact that they don't want to give Surtur another weapon. Surtur's been really good for really long time. Not really long time, but for long enough. Probably one of the most slept on decks in the game right now that just no one's playing. That's super good. Annihilus, though, has completely fallen off. I don't know if this changes Annihilus much. Annihilus, like, you're seeing him in the C6 deck with Moonstone as of recording right now, which is kind of funny. Because you're able to play the Hood, get the 6 power Demon, of course. And then Annihilus is a 6 powered card as well. You send over the Demon. Now, obviously, this doesn't work with that deck. But Annihilus is seeing like a sliver of play in C6, which is absolute copium in and of itself. So yeah, I can get behind this change. Sentry needed something. Moving it from a 4-10 to a 4-8 was just too much. It was way too much. And there's way bigger evils in junk than there is like in Annihilus. There's so many extra junk tools now. So Annihilus doesn't even feel like a problem anymore. Despite being honestly a really good card. So I'm glad they made this change. This one's a good one. Another good one. Onslaught's always been decent, I feel like. Moving him to a 6-8, I think gives Tribunal that little bit of extra reach. This is a big buff for Tribunal. It shouldn't feel that way, but when you Onslaught Iron Man, you got that extra power, suddenly you feel it, right? You feel a little different. This is a card that I think has been on the fringes of being playable. Very combo-centric. You're often chasing just the straight up, the effect of doubling the ongoing effects. But again, in Tribunal, that extra 1 power is going to be significant. I like it. He hasn't quite kept up with the 6 drops in Snap lately. So I think this makes a lot of sense. And it makes a lot of sense with this change. Now, this is a change we've been talking about for a while. Take a little bit of power off Mr. Fantastic, make him a 3-1, Ravonna synergy, by the way, and give him +3 power to locations. Now, what you have is you're playing him in the middle, you play him with the Onslaught, you're getting a lot more power. You're getting 6 power, right? It does step on the toes of Miss Marvel a little bit, who really feels unplayable now. But this might actually be kind of cool. Does it have potential in something like a Surfer deck? I don't know. It'll take some testing. The +3 power is enticing, especially when you consider that the +3 power is like pure power. It doesn't get impacted by negative zone. It doesn't get impacted by locations you can't play in. It has that versatility, but you also have the restriction of probably wanting to play in the middle. But if you have to, you can play him on a side as well. So he does have some snap equity there because like you can surprise people with reaching in somewhere with Mr. Fantastic. This had to happen. He needed something. This feels like the most mild-mannered approach to changing Mr. Fantastic, and I'm here for it. At least they did something. I don't know if they needed to take a power off. I think that's a little conservative, but given they buffed Onslaught, it's probably the appropriate play. But he could fall to 3-2 ultimately. But I don't know. They took him this long to touch him in the first place, so I don't know if Mr. Fantastic ever gets changed. And then you got Hela. This is actually a big change, a massive change. And so they've been trying to figure out Hela for a while, and they're saying in the note here that they think they're reaching a bit high on it, so they wouldn't expect to have to change the effect much more than this, but perhaps change the power from here. Hela now reads, on reveal, for each different cost among them, resurrect a card you discarded to a random location. A little bit of a weird text box there that kind of reads awkwardly, but I actually like this change a lot, because what it does is it takes Hela out of this like, well, we're just going to discard a whole bunch of chonky 6 drops and 5 drops and stuff and then bring them all back and just, slam you with power. I think the deck building consideration becomes a lot more interesting. Like, do you discard Ebony Maw with Colleen Wing? And then do you get rid of someone like a Doctor Doom because you want the wide power spread? Do you want to keep Gigantos in those decks, right? It's pretty interesting what you can do from that perspective. So I kind of like it, how you have this curve and you're discarding things. And it also it makes so that, like, they're right in the developer note that now the toggle is going to be the power of Hela as a kind of a balanced toggle, which I do appreciate. I think this is an interesting change. I do feel that this is a change that I think is worth kind of like exploring with Hela, because Hela is the kind of card that I think is very frustrating for players to play, like the traditional version of Hela, but it's a very fun version to play. Like, it's a fun take on discard, and if you want more interesting takes on different archetypes, then having Hela in playable is kind of cool, right? You don't have Black Knight anymore. Bullseye is going to be its own take on discard, which is cool, but I do think that Hela, having her at least present in the game, is at least something, right? And also, if you consider the changes to Luke Cage, Hela just is totally unplayable. I mean, she has been for a while, and so maybe that's for the better, because Hela has been traditionally very uninteractive. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. I'd be very interested in hearing your comments about the changes, the OTA and stuff like that. It's been a bit of a wild ride. So anyways, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you on that next one.